Hi, I'm here in the studio with Gabby Allard.
Hi.
And
Was that the start? Is that how we're starting?
I have
Oh,
no
okay.
idea. I was just pretending that that's how we start it.
Oh, okay.
We still don't. That's the other thing. We need to figure out like a way to start.
And a way to end.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast that I listened to, and I was like, oh, the host, like, she just has this spiel that she says, like, at the end every time. And I'm like, we should just have that.
Yeah.
She always thanks her producer. So we should thank Devin.
Oh, yeah.
We should.
Thanks to our producer, to Stevie, our video editor, and Devin, our producer.
Yeah. Is that how we're starting it? By thanking Stevie and Devin?
That's not, it can be how you start it. How do normal podcasts start? Maybe I'll just go listen to the first minute of a bunch of different podcasts.
Yeah.
And
we need media training.
Yeah, we do. Until then, you just get us rambling until we finally start.
Yes. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Unnamed Youth Podcast that we were just debating that we should name it like an actual real name. But that's a problem for another day.
Mm-hmm. That's what we say every single time, though.
Yes. So. Yeah. So anyway, I'm just going to dive right in.
Yeah.
I have a fun little intro icebreaker
question. I think I saw what it was and I was scared.
Yeah. Okay. So today's topic, we're going to be talking about like the problem of evil. Where does evil come from? All of that those kinds of questions, which are great and have plagued humanity for a long, long time. So in order to kick that off, what's something evil that you did as a child that haunts you to this day?
Oh, that haunts me to this day?
Yeah. That you like still randomly think about and are like, oh, why did I do that?
Yeah. I mean, Kyle would be able to tell you it so fast. The one that I like go to first is, so when you're like a teenager in the Christian world, swearing is like this huge thing. And we were at camp with my grandparents. It was a Christian camp. My grandpa's a pastor. And they were like very rule oriented. And somehow we were at camp for like 2 weeks with them. It was like a family camp. And at some point, Kyle and I got into a fight. I did something wrong, whatever. And he like had told my grandparents that I was swearing. And I was like 13 or 14 or something like that. And I just like sat with my grandparents and explained to them how much I hated swearing, how bad it was, how unintelligent it made you. And then like spun it so that Kyle was wrong and got him in trouble. And I was completely in the wrong, like 100% in the wrong.
Wow.
And I did the very manipulative older brother.
Yeah, that's like conniving.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure Kyle's forgiven me for most things I did, but not that one.
Not
yet.
that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he's going to wait till his deathbed to forgive me of that one. So
yeah, brutal.
Yeah, it is. What about you?
I've told you this one before, and this, I'm sure there are things as a kid that I did too. But the one thing that I remember, and I cringe and feel bad about to this day, was in 9th grade science class, there was a girl who was giving a presentation, and she kept saying, She'd go, in between everything that she was saying. And me being like the snobby know-it-all, like, I thought I was like so smart and too like just above all of my peers intellectually as a 15-year-old. So I sat there and I started tallying her and I didn't just do it for myself. I also like elbowed one of my friends sitting next to me and like clued her into what I was doing. Super mean. Shouldn't have done that. I feel really bad about that. And then, I got my just desserts because when I started as an intern here, and often when I speak and when I am nervous in my role, I say frequently, and students remind me and count how many times I say So,
ouch.
Yeah. To that girl that was in my science class, I'm sorry. I know how it feels now.
The unnamed. Yeah. At least you didn't like give it to her afterwards and.
No, but it did get back to her. Like, I don't know how it got back to her, but it did get back to her.
How many friends did you share it with?
I don't remember.
Wow.
Yeah. So, not very nice.
Yeah.
And I think about that to this day, and I feel bad.
Yeah. Hunting memories are terrible.
Yes.
So, sorry, all of you teenagers that have made dumb mistakes. Apparently, you still think about them when you're older.
Yes. Yeah. You do. You do. So, there we go. Now I'm going to be like really aware of every time I say, but you taught on Wednesday. Today is Wednesday.
Yeah.
But you're maybe watching this.
Yep. I'm teaching
on Friday.
tonight. Yeah.
So what did you teach on? Tell us a little bit. Recap your teaching for us.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about connecting. So you started by explaining, here's God and he creates this world. And you ended it by talking about like God space and people space are together. It's this perfect idea of humans partnering with God to just keep making life better and better. And that's the vision. And so it's the super happy, hopeful beginning. And then so I pick up that part of the story, and in Genesis, the middle of Genesis 2, it starts out and Adam's there and he names the animals and he's working with God and partnering with him, and God makes him a helper, Eve, to be with him. And so again, it looks like it's going great. And then the serpent comes along, this beast. And I guess I've skipped, I'm not used to summarize. I skipped a very important part. When everything's going great, God puts this tree in the middle of the garden and says, you can't eat from that tree. And so it gives Adam and Eve a choice. He gives Adam and Eve a choice to follow him or to not follow him. And a serpent comes along and tests them and traps them by lying. And so it takes this choice God gave Adam and Eve and tricks them into rejecting God. And through that, like everything starts to unravel. We'll go through a bunch of different things, but ultimately it ends with the humans being exiled from the garden. And this is where the story, like you had this super hopeful beginning, and instead heaven and earth are split. Humans aren't with God anymore. They're not in the garden, the place where they should be. And it's going to end with a little bit of hope, but it's basically just a really depressing night, or will be.
Yeah, no, I remember being very glad and feeling lucky that I got to do Genesis 1, because it is this really hopeful, happy beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to just leave us on a pretty big downer.
But there's there'll be a lot of hopeful things that I'll talk that
Yes.
I talked about, like that God steps towards us when we do something wrong, that He provides hope, and so yeah. I keep thinking I'm giving away what I'm talking about, and I'm like, they already know what I talked about. So I'm just reminding them. But yeah, so
yeah. Okay, that's true. Always hope. There's always hope in the Bible.
Yeah. So it's the entrance of evil into the story, which didn't take long to happen.
Yeah. Chapter 2.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 2?
No, 3.
3. Yeah. So, I also wrote down, should we do announcements on this? I wrote this down and I skipped over it already.
Junior hires, you're bowling. So if you're listening to this on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday before the 9th, if you're just at fall retreat, I guess this weekend could be fall retreat, but yeah. On the 9th, you're bowling. It's just high school.
Yeah, so junior hires don't come to Woodlands on Wednesday, the 9th.
Bring $10 to 5-Star Lanes from 6:30 to 8:30.
Too. And make sure someone's there to pick you up at 8:30.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anyway, now that I've like completely destroyed what would have been a brilliant segue from your summary into
Devin, our producer's got it. He'll
No,
he'll fix it.
Yeah. So I think one of the big questions that often gets brought up or begged by the story is like, okay, so there's this serpent and he's kind of like whispering these half-truths, like evil desires kind of into Adam and Eve's, specifically Eve's ear. Mm-hmm. So then the question that oftentimes gets raised is like, wait, I thought that God's creation was this like really good creation and that everything in it was good. And then all of a sudden now there's like this evil character that's twisting and warping what's supposed to be a good ordered place where God says what happens and then it happens. But then this new character kind of gets introduced. So I wanted to talk about and think a little bit about like who is the serpent? Like what's with the serpent? Like why can he talk? Like what? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. Do you have thoughts that you want to go into first, or do you want me to just blindly stumble into thoughts first?
Stumble into it.
Yeah, there's a lot going on with the serpent. I think what's something important to note, which this is probably stuff where you'll get into, is that there are 2 times when an animal talks in the Bible. I don't know if you know this. One of them is the donkey, Balaam. I was going to say Baal's. Donkey, yeah. Balaam's donkey. Both of them are situations having to do with spiritual evil. And so this is not like a super common, it's not like a myth, like, oh, they're just talking animals in the garden because it's the garden. Like,
right.
It's very clear, even in the narrative right before that the animals weren't suitable to be Adam's partner. he names them. He has dominion over them. So the serpent comes along, and it's a talking serpent that then deceives. Serpent, it's a serpent figure, which in the ancient world meant two things. I don't know how much I'm stealing, or if this is where you're going.
No, that's okay.
One of them was in Egypt specifically, but it was a symbol of wisdom. And then the second would be that the seraphim, which some of you might be familiar with. Seraphim come up in the Bible. They're spiritual beings. They're not angels, but they're spiritual beings. They're like cherubim, seraphim. They're these like things. It means a burning one or whatever, and it relates to a serpent because when you got bit, it burned. And so serpents are already these figures that relate to spiritual beings in a lot of imagery and even the language that's used. So for an ancient reader, I would guess, I don't know because I'm not an ancient reader, but I'd guess like they would read a serpent and go, okay, yeah, it's connected to a spiritual being. It's also, serpents could literally kill people, and so it was an actual threat to people's lives. So it's this beast coming, and we were just told that Adam and Eve were supposed to rule over the beasts, and then a beast comes to like conflict with what God told them. And it's connected to spirit. Yeah. So I don't know if you want me to keep going.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. That touches on a lot of what we're going to be talking about and sets up a lot of what we're going to end up talking about. But yeah, I think the spiritual being piece is like pretty heavily implied because another thing that scripture talks about is it being like the craftiest being of like all of the creatures. So there is kind of this implication of, okay, this is something different than like the rest of the animals that were given to Adam and Eve to name, maybe, or Adam to name. Yeah. So there's this spiritual being, but like why is he not doing God's will? Like why? I think that's the question that then gets begged is like why isn't he doing like what's good and right in this place where that's supposed to be like the only thing that's happening is what's good.
Is that a rhetorical question or a question for me to try to answer?
I think we'll both like parse it out. So
okay,
do you want to stab at it first?
Yeah, I was just thinking, it's weird. So first, it's interesting, like the assumption that it's not doing God's will. We'll land there. But I think the assumption right away of going, like we know the story so much, like we talked a lot about frameworks and how we come into the story with like, oh yeah, Adam and Eve in the garden, they're great. But then Satan comes along as a serpent, how we like see the story, lies to Adam and Eve. They sin, they fall. Sorry, I should have brought water.
You can twist it off if you want some.
I think it was like a piece of rice from lunch. That's gross. I don't know. I had rice. So Adam and Eve sin, they fall, they become sinful, whatever. Like we have this way of seeing it. But the next time, I don't know if it's the next time. The story of Job comes to my mind of like God enlisting a spiritual being to actually go test someone. And it's a situation where like bad things happen to the person to test them to see their character. So it's like interesting to go into the story. We go into it automatically knowing or like seeing it as this is an evil character doing something against God's will. But that might not actually be entirely apparent if you were just going to the story. I don't know. So that's just something curious that I'm thinking about. Yeah, I don't know where I was.
I think it is kind of understood in the question that he poses to Eve, though, that there is like a certain level of undermining God's authority and God's word, even like what God has said. Like I think throughout up until now, what we've seen is when God says something, it's what happens. You know, like there isn't anyone to challenge or rival or try to undermine God's word and God's authority. And this is the first time that we see
that's true, because
happening.
they wouldn't have Job in their mind. It would be like, whoa, everything's perfect and great, and then there's somebody against God. Where did this against God thing come from?
Yeah.
And it'd be, keep reading. I don't know. Yeah. I think that's like a great, like, those are the things that you should take note of, where like if you're reading the story as a story and as a, like if you're following the narrative and not trying to bring all the stuff you already know into it, that would be a great question of like, where did this come from? There's no mention, at least that we know of, or that maybe you're tuned into, but I think there might be a mention of anyway.
Yeah. So that question of like, where did this come from, I think is a really interesting question. And I brought something and I printed it out for you. And this is an excerpt from a first century Jewish work of literature called The Life of Adam and Eve. I don't know if have you ever heard of
No,
this?
this is fun.
Okay. I figured that you would find this fun. So basically, this is like a writing. It's from like a collection of writings called the Apocrypha of Moses.
Huh? Fun.
Yeah, super fun. And basically, what it is, and the reason that I bring this up is not because I'm trying to say that this like has equal authority of what the Bible says. It doesn't. I just want to make that really clear. But when we are reading the Bible, sometimes it is helpful to bring in other sources that lend us maybe some perspective of how like some of the not necessarily original readers, but readers like closer to the origin of Scripture would have heard and understood some of these stories. So basically what this is, it's like...
When was this from again?
1st century
Okay,
AD.
interesting.
So basically what this is, people guess.
Yeah, but so that's contemporary with Jesus's followers and the Jesus movement.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. So what this is it's basically like an imaginative retelling of Adam and Eve once they're banished from the garden. So it's basically this author is picking up with and trying to like unpack some of the themes and some ideas of maybe what was going on. And part of it recounts Adam and Eve then have this second interaction with the serpent. And here he's named as like the devil. And basically they're like...
And this is Jewish?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. And basically they ask him like, why'd you do that? Like, why'd you lie to us? Like, what's your issue with us? So I don't know if you want to read
I love this
highlighted.
Is like confrontation between... It's like someone does something wrong to you, and then like if that girl who you were like kind of like, and maybe she did confront you, like came back around and was like, Gabby, why would you do that to me?
Yeah, exactly. So I highlighted what all to read. But
okay.
Yeah.
She cried out to
she being Eve.
Eve, saying, "Woe to you, devil! For what reason do you fight against us? What concern do you have with us?" That's so interesting because that sounds so much like Jesus and the demons. Like when they talk to the Son of Man, like, what concern do you have? Like, that's a very like fighting with evil 1st century language already. So that's interesting. What have we done to you that you should persecute us so grievously? Why does your malice extend to us? Did we ever take your glory from you or cause you to be without honor? Why do you persecute us, O enemy, impiously and jealously unto death? Groaning, the devil said. Should I say this groaning?
No.
Oh, Adam, all my enmity, jealousy, and resentment is towards you. Since on account of you, I was expelled and alienated from my glory, which I had in heaven in the midst of the angels. On account of you, I was cast out upon the earth. Adam answered, what have I done to you? What fault do I have against you? Since you have not been harmed nor injured by us, why do you persecute us? The devil answered, Adam, what are you saying to me? On account of you, I was cast out from heaven. When you were formed, I was cast out from the face of God and was sent forth from the company of the angels. When God blew into you the breath of life, and your countenance and likeness were made in the image of God, Michael led you. Michael is an archangel, a super angel. Michael led you and made you worship in the sight of God. The Lord God then said, behold, Adam, I have made you in our image and likeness. Having gone forth, Michael called all the angels, saying, worship the image of the Lord God, just as the Lord God has commanded. Fascinating. Mm-hmm. Michael himself worshipped first, then he called me and said, worship the image of God. It's Yahweh, Jehovah. I answered, I do not have it within me to worship Adam. When Michael compelled me to worship, I said to him, why do you compel me? I will not worship him who is lower and posterior to me. I am prior to that creature. Before he was made, I had already been made. He ought to worship me. Hearing this, other angels who were under me were unwilling to worship him. Michael said, worship the image of God. If you do not worship, the Lord God will grow angry with you. Said, I don't know where that said comes from. Anyway, if he grows angry with me, I will place my seat above the stars of heaven, and I will be like the Most High.
Capital M, capital H.
Yeah, so Satan is saying, if God grows angry with me, I'll put my seat in the stars of the heavens, and I'll be like him. Then the Lord God grew angry with me and sent me forth with my angels from our glory. On account of you, we were expelled from our dwelling into this world and cast upon the earth. Immediately we were in grief, since we had been despoiled of so much glory, and we grieved to see you in such a great happiness of delights. By a trick, I cheated your wife and caused you to be expelled through her from the delights of your happiness, just as I had been expelled from my glory. That's fascinating.
Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
So I bring that up because I think it highlights a couple things that we maybe wouldn't necessarily be like clued or keyed into when reading kind of the Genesis like 1-3 account that maybe an ancient reader would have noticed and recognized. One of those things being that the spiritual being, Satan, the devil, if we want to use those kind of interchangeably, but what he says is like he was jealous essentially. So since humans were like kind of like the last part of creation and we're like made out of dust, essentially he's looking at that and is saying, why are humans any special? Like we were created first, these spiritual beings, we were made before humans were. So why would God make humans to be the one in his image? And
in case that sounds stupid, think of your interaction with a younger sibling or with a 7th grader. I don't know why this is the case. It's generational sin, I think, between students of looking at younger grades with like absolute hate, annoyance. So if that sounded dumb to you, of like, oh, why would an angel think that someone made after them should be less than them? Just look at your last couple interactions with grades lower than you and reflect. Yeah.
Oh, that makes me think of, I remember when I was a freshman on the swim team and the like group of seniors at that time like thought that it was like part of the like initiation almost of like being the lowest on the totem pole is that you would get like not bullied. They never bullied us. That's like too strong. But it was very like,
put you in your place.
That's my shower that I use. Get like, that's my locker that I use. And very, very much like, you don't deserve that. You're the lowest on the totem pole. And I think that's exactly kind of the idea that this author, I don't know who wrote this, is riffing on here of like.
Sounds like a riff on Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
Of like the dream Joseph has, which are stars and moon. Like that's part of the imagery as well. And that his older sibling should have to worship.
Why are stars and moons significant?
Are you going to get to that?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't think.
Yeah, they probably don't.
Yeah.
So to an ancient person, so if you didn't know this, planets meant wanderer. So like an ancient person looked up at the sky and they looked at all these lights, and to them they were spiritual beings. They were what could be called gods, angels. Like they were a being different than a human. So they'd look up at the night sky and they'd see all of these stars and moon and everything, and it'd be a spiritual being. That's why the sun and moon were often worshipped in a lot of cultures, especially Egypt, where the Israelites came from after exile.
Yeah, and that's kind of the implication in even the creation account of day 4. So when lights in day 4 are made to like rule and govern over like the sky and like when it's day and when it's night and when seasons come, the kind of implication in that is that the stars are like essentially representative of these spiritual beings that aren't necessarily God, but like are these other kinds of beings, like how we think of angels or seraphim or cherubim. Yeah.
So then you take this like dream that Joseph has of these star planet things worshiping, and he's the youngest. So like that's bringing back Joseph riffs, which is interesting.
Yeah. No, this is definitely a theme that is carried throughout most of the Old Testament, is this idea of some people being elevated above above what culture would say is like their right or their status. Joseph being a great example of that because he was the youngest of the brothers. So in even
it'd be like if you're younger, like imagine a big family and then the youngest sibling gets their license at like 10. And the parents are like throwing the keys and you're like a 17-year-old or 18-year-old and for some reason you didn't get to do the driver's program and your parents wouldn't let you drive. Like that's the kind of like, it would probably be even worse than that. And you get to like watch your 10-year-old brother get the keys and be like, they're going to crash the car. You got to be kidding me.
Right.
Like that's the kind of like affront it was to Joseph's brothers and then more so maybe to the angels in this account.
Yeah. So And even without this account, I think this account like really acutely and like highlights it in like a really direct way, less direct than what Genesis is doing here. But I think in the Genesis account, you can read really clearly that it's like God's creation in humans, the people that he makes, are elevated to this way higher status than they would maybe deserve. Like they're literally the creatures that are made out of dust. Like literally, like when you think of the insult dirtbag, like, we're literally that's kind of what humans are made out of, is we're dust that God breathed life into. And then he says, and that's what's made in his image. And not even the spiritual beings are like given that title in that category.
To help maybe some of you who are still trying to think about like, how are we talking about this and what is this apocrypha, this text? One of the things that helped me was, if you've watched The Chosen, I should have said this before we were introducing it, but we know when we watch The Chosen or like a book or a movie about the Bible that the person, when they're making the movie, for the most part, they're not doing it literally because we don't know what the scene would have looked like. So even if they're doing like shot for shot, word for word, and it's every word in the Bible, you have to guess what the tone was, what the situation was. Like there's just so much you have to creatively add. And in the same way, you'd watch The Chosen and you would go, yep, they're taking the Bible and they're trying to help us understand it and live in it. The ancient writers were doing really similar things. And so in the same way that in like 1,000 years, if they still had a copy of The Chosen, they could be like, hey, what did people in the year 2000 think about Christianity? They could watch The Chosen, read it next to the Bible and go, oh, this is what they thought because of how they interpreted and understood. And so we're doing a similar thing with this and saying, okay, we have this like creative fan fiction of the Bible, which is kind of what it is. So what does that tell us about the people who wrote this fan fiction? It's a crass way of putting it, but it's well thought out and authoritative fan fiction, but fan fiction.
Yeah. So what does this have to do with the problem of evil?
What does it have to do with that, Gabby?
Yeah. I think one of the things that was super fascinating to me about this is that it brings in the problem of evil from an angle of actually like God's created creatures not being able to like fathom and handle his generosity. So
that takes me back to the parable that Jesus tells of I don't know if that's what you were thinking of.
No.
Where he has everybody come, or he goes out to people who are working. And again, like you can imagine siblings or friends or even like school, this exact same scenario. But he goes out and he hires somebody early in the morning to work and he says, I'll pay you a whatever, $10, $100, day's wages. Hour later, he goes and he hires someone. Hour later, he keeps hiring people, but every time he hires them, he says he's going to pay them the same amount, a day's wages. And the people that get hired early in the morning are like, why are you paying them the same as you're paying us when they worked less? And he's like, I made it. Yeah. So like, it's giving me interesting. That's fun.
Yeah. And I think the same way that, and what I mean by that is, and that parable illustrates that really well in like a practical way that I think people can connect with. But what we do, at least, I don't know, maybe I'm the only person that does this. I hope not. But what we do is we like look out at the world and the people around us and we make assessments basically pretty much all the time about what's fair and what's not fair for the people around us. And when we see someone experiencing or being gifted something that we think is like way more than what they deserve, especially when we feel like we're not being recognized for what we deserve, my reaction a lot of the time is to be jealous and to want to find a way to take that for myself. And if I can't take it for myself, then the instinct a lot of times is to say, well, how can I make sure that that person isn't actually getting that? Because in my assessment, that's not fair.
Like their happiness makes me less happy.
Yeah. And I think this retelling like captures that idea with the serpent and kind of reads that into his motives. And I mean, we don't know for sure if that's like the motive behind what was happening here. But like I said, I think there is really clear evidence that God is really clearly raising up humans to a status that is super generous and beyond what most people would say they deserve and what's fair. And then the fact that I even have that own like voice and desire and instinct within myself and can recognize that that's like a not good and an evil desire, truly. I think that does create like a pretty compelling picture for what could be happening here. Yeah. I don't know what you think about that, but
I don't know. I'm fascinated now with thinking through the development of evil through the story, because like what I'm going to talk about next week is going to be how in humans you see the evil just explode. Like it goes from this really I think most people when they read Genesis 3, their big problem is like, okay, they ate a fruit and all of humanity is like literally damned because of it. Like this seems like overkill. And we'll explain, hopefully I explained really well, right? Why that's not what's happening. But then I think sometimes we underplay how quickly things get really, really, really bad. Especially like in the Western world, most of us don't deal with real evil super often. So even like our stories of like, what did you do as a kid that's evil? Like, that's really tame. Like it's still evil. Like I want to be fair that what we were doing was wrong.
Right.
But I mean, for the spoiler alert, it goes from eating a fruit, like disobeying God, to killing out of jealousy. Like what you were just talking about, like seeing something, like again, that repeats.
So I'm going there pretty explicitly next.
Sorry.
Yeah. No. It's good. So, and I don't know if this is going to end up stepping on your toes a little bit next week for next week's teaching. So, if you watch the podcast, you get a fresh insight into what's happening next week for the teaching. But
the learning is so, meditative and cyclical.
Yes. And I think another reason that I think this is a compelling picture for what's happening in even like Genesis 2 and 3 is because then the same theme gets picked up and played out over and over again throughout Scripture. So, and it does get picked up in chapter 4 with Cain and Abel. So basically to summarize super quickly, oh wow, the big Bible. To summarize super quickly, there's two brothers, Cain and Abel. Abel brings an offering to God, and essentially there's some implications that the offering is maybe a better offering, like a more righteous and like highly exalting like offering. And Cain brings an offering too, and God looks on Abel's offering with favor, but not on Cain's. And then Cain is basically really jealous and angry with his brother. And I think what God says to Cain ends up being...
And it's like a human example to maybe understand a little bit what could be happening is if you imagine the situation of like, again, maybe a family or a friend or in a schoolroom, some social situation, maybe even your small group. And you imagine like everybody in your small group did something for the leader. And you walk into small group and there's like all the pictures that one person in the group made for the leader displayed and no one else. Or like your parents, like you come home and you and your siblings all give your parents like an art project you work on as a kid, and your parents take yours and they're like, trash, and then they put one up, which I mean makes God sound really bad. But like that's the feeling that Cain probably would have had to God not accepting his sacrifice, but God was right in doing it. So that's not like a mean parent just throwing one away.
Yeah. And I think maybe I'll read this and then maybe build on that a little bit too. But so this is in verse 6 of Genesis 4. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." So what's happening here? And one of the things in verse 7, will you not be accepted? Okay, I'm blanking on this now, but
that's why I had my laptop instead of
the word there that is in the Hebrew is, I'm pretty sure, exalted. So like, if you do what's right, will you too not be exalted? So basically God is saying to Cain, like, be patient and trust my timing. Like if you do what's right, like you'll be exalted and recognized for that too. So that's almost like, I almost think about, maybe one week you come into your small group and all the pictures are displayed and you get really down and you're really angry and maybe you like say a bunch of mean things about your leaders behind their back. And then the next week you come in and then all of your pictures are on display and your leaders were like, oh, we just wanted to we wanted to honor one person every single week. And then you feel like bad and guilty because
like, oh, I kind of assumed something that wasn't right.
Yeah.
Which is that's a great like circle back to my example of where it's not that God was doing something wrong. He clearly is stating like, Cain did something wrong. We don't clearly know what that is.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
there's okay, I'll tell a quick, do you know the Tim Keller story about the carrot?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tim Keller gives a great example to like help bring us in this world. So I'll tell it to you. So imagine a king in an ancient world, and there's a farmer, and the farmer is out and he's in his, farming his land, and this king owns everything. But this farmer goes and he takes a carrot, and he gets like the best carrot, and he goes and he takes it to the king, and he gives him this carrot as like and again, a carrot, you're like, that's a weird thing. But in an agricultural society where food is important, it was a gift that he was giving to the king, his best carrot. And the king gets this gift, and he realizes like how good of a gift that was, because that person could have sold it and they could have used it to buy more, whatever. And so the king is honored by the gift from his servant, and he decides, I'm going to give that servant more land. Like if that's the kind of servant it is, I'm going to give him more land so that he can farm more. He's clearly a good servant.
Mm-hmm.
He like cares about me. So he gives this servant a bunch more land, and his neighbor finds out about this. And his neighbor is like, oh, he took the king the best carrot and he got land. And this guy was a tomato farmer. And so he gets his best tomato, takes it into the king, and walks in and goes, here's my best tomato. The king goes, thank you, takes it, and then you may leave. And the guy starts to get really upset. And finally, he just comes back and he yells at the king and he says, why didn't you give me land when I gave you my best tomato, just like you gave my neighbor? And the king says to him, he gave me his best. You gave yourself your best. And the idea being, when the first man brought the carrot to the king, he was genuinely giving it to the king. And when the second man brought the tomato, what he was really doing was trying to get something from the king. He wasn't actually giving his best. He was giving it so he could get something else. Like he had an ulterior motive.
Yep.
So that hopefully maybe that story brings a little bit into what was probably happening.
No, I think that's great. Yeah. So God is.
I was going to say interestingly, the exalted word, the next time it shows up in that form in the Hebrew Bible is this line in Genesis 49, Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength, excelling or exalted, lifted up in honor, lifted up in power. Just fascinating that like, what does it directly relate to? A firstborn is where the word is then used next.
Yep. Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah. So I don't remember where I was going with this now.
Sorry.
But no, that's okay. That's okay. So I think in the same way, there's this idea of being jealous about what one person has, about a way that maybe God is even like interacting with or blessing someone in the same way that your carrot story illustrates that. And then that first instinct being like, well, how can I, in my sense of the world, in my sense of like right and wrong and what's fair and what isn't fair, how can I like make that right? And now I wasn't planning on mentioning this, but something that I always think about is, I don't remember what context you were teaching this in, but you were teaching, and it was while I was an intern, and you talked about a study where they had a bunch of people like play video games against the computer, and they had it rigged so, they had it so it was, you would win exactly 50% of the time.
Yep.
And then when they asked people like, did it feel fair? People said no. And basically what the research showed, I think.
It's even more than the research. It's like years and years of like, there's so much money in the video game world.
Yeah.
They're highly motivated to make it feel right. So this isn't just like, they didn't do a study with like 1,000 gamers and ask them questions. It was like, as game developers were designing and getting feedback for the game, this gets shown over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
In every game they develop. Yep.
Yeah. So basically the idea is that like it doesn't feel fair to us if it's like actually 50-50 even fair. It only actually feels fair to us when the odds are like in
65, 70%.
Our favor.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think about that all the time, because then I think about, oh my gosh, the lens, the framework that I view the world for of like what's fair is always going to be with like me in mind. And I have to be like really proactive and aware that that's going to be my bent all the time, is to think that fair is really only fair when like I'm benefiting at least a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, I think about it all the time, because I think if something feels fair to me, it's probably unfair to the person I'm comparing it to.
Yeah. Yes.
Because otherwise I would feel like it's unfair.
Yes.
Because it's just how, it's crazy how widespread that like statistic has been shown to be true.
Yes.
It's wild.
Yes. Yeah. So anyway, trying to circle this back to
maybe motivation for why this evil. And so what's even interesting is when you talk about like, where did evil come from? This is like right now we're even answering the question of like, where did this specific evil creature come from?
Mm-hmm.
Like, here's this specific spiritual being, which then looking at the Genesis 3 narrative, you'd argue, well, like human evil sprung from an interaction with this evil. Right?
Yeah. And I think sprung from an interaction specifically where there was a certain framework about what was fair and what was right and what was wrong that was being projected onto God instead of like trusting God's definition of those things. And if we're partial towards like the life of Adam and Eve recounting, that's what happens. That's what happened in the spiritual realm. Was there was this rebellion, which is pretty commonly accepted in Christian thought and understanding, and Jewish thought and understanding too. And then that's mirrored in like the human world too. Is because of then the influence of that spiritual being. Then the humans have a similar kind of fall, a rejection of God.
And what's so weird is, I think what's funny is when you talk about this stuff, even for myself, it feels weird to talk about like spiritual beings or like something. But what's so strange, like where I keep having to like remind myself is that when we read the Old Testament, we don't think there's a lot of spirituality in it or spiritual beings. And there are. For some reason, it feels weirder to talk about them in the Old Testament than the New. Like you can't read the Gospels without saying there's clearly like a spiritual element going on. Like from the very beginning pages of the Gospels to the end, like who does Jesus keep being in competition with? These demons that are in control, that are like, there's a temptation literally with Satan out in the wilderness. So it's like, I don't know why I feel like it's weird. I don't know if you feel the same way.
No, I don't really feel the same way.
Oh,
so
okay.
That's interesting.
Maybe that's generational or something.
I don't know. But I think maybe because in part, like some of the most popular Old Testament stories are ones with like maybe a little bit more obvious spiritual element at play, where things are mentioned a little bit more explicitly. But like I even think about the story of Balaam, and his donkey. But I think where I wanted. How long have we been going?
I don't know.
Probably long.
42 minutes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is probably a good place to land because what I wanted to land with is actually this. It's a verse from Ephesians that I think summarizes this idea that we've maybe been talking about, not maybe super explicitly, but hopefully this will help crystallize that. So in Ephesians 6:12, Paul says, and this is in the passage about like putting on the full armor of God. But verse 12 says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." So I think when I think about the problem of evil and where does evil come from, I think Paul really explicitly tells us here, the problem of evil is less about the person in your math class that you don't like. And it's actually a lot more about a spiritual reality that we aren't always in tune to and don't always see or are aware of. But that's actually the battle that we're fighting against, to use that kind of battle language that Paul's using here.
Not the other humans in our life or in our world.
Yes.
Which like that's what's so fascinating about Genesis 3 is the serpent comes along, deceives Eve, and all like he does put enmity, strife, conflict between humans and this serpent, this beast. But the main conflict you see is between the humans and between God. It's like there's all this fighting happening.
But that's what God warns Cain against, right? In Genesis 4 is God says, it's not your brother that's your enemy. He says there's sin, and he like personifies sin as like this creature that's like crouching and like wants to devour and like rule over Cain. But he says that God's essentially saying that's what your enemy is. It's not your brother. But Cain doesn't listen.
Which is like, I was just listening to it. Like I had never realized or noticed. I never put the beast picture together. That like God creates the beast, humans rule over them in Genesis 1. And then what happens? A beast of the field comes and tricks them. And then what happens in chapter 4? a beast is crouching and wants to rule over you. Like the exact opposite of what God said. Humans are supposed to rule over a beast, and yet this beast is about to rule over humans. And so there's like all of this, I don't know, fun like interplay happening.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. Which is exactly what, again, if we're listening to and like taking this seriously, and what I think is interesting then is that's like exactly what the tempter wanted, was to like be the one to rule over the humans.
Yep.
But God raised and elevated humans to a higher honor and status by making them in his image.
Which even New Testament language, like when Paul says, you will rule over angels, like all of a sudden that imagery comes in.
Yes.
Like, oh yeah, interesting.
Yes. Yeah. Like we're supposed to be the co-rulers with God. And that's something that we are still invited into, even though we're not in, even though we're in a post-fall world. But yeah. So I don't know if that's encouraging to you all. It's encouraging to me that like when, and encouraging in like a, like it riles me up kind of way of like when I give into sin and temptation, like that's exactly what like these evil spiritual forces want. Like I'm letting them rule over me when I'm supposed to rule over them.
And not for my good.
Yeah.
Like trusting that God's way is actually for my good, even if in the moment it doesn't feel like that.
Right.
Or in many moments, maybe. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Well,
this was fun.
Yeah. So that's all we have time for this week. Next week, junior high bowling, and senior high, you will hear Justin's teaching that you haven't heard yet. So if you're listening to this on like this Friday. Yep.
And then we'll finally be synced up.
Yes.
After that.
Yes. And then junior high and senior high will be on the same page teaching wise. Yeah. So if you have questions or thoughts about the things that we've been talking about on this podcast or in our teachings too, you can always text those questions into the Woodlands youth number, which I don't know off the top of my head right now.
But if you get texts from us that say, hey, if you got a text about this video or about like Wednesday night, just text that number back. Or you can email youth@woodlandschurch.org.
Yes.
If you want to email.
That too. Yeah.
Sometimes typing out a question is easier than texting it, but that's probably for me because I'm old.
You are a little bit old in that way.
I like keyboard. I can type really fast on a keyboard.
Nice. Okay. Well, I think that's all we have for today, and we will hopefully see you. Hopefully, junior hires, I will see you at 5 Star for bowling, and senior hires, Justin will see you.
Are you going to bowling?
Who's going to go to bowling if I don't?
Well, Angel's gone.
Oh. Well, I should go to bowling too.
Oh, okay.
Don't you think?
I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe I won't see you junior hires. I'll probably see you. Bowling's fun. Okay.
Okay.
See you Wednesday.
Bye.
Bye.